still around the world, there are more than 3 billion people who are not or who lack access to sufficient financial services. So we're talking more than a third of the population. But over the last, say, 5 or 10 years, the term financial inclusion itself has really changed. So before, where we were talking specifically about, do you have access to a bank account? Do you have access to insurance products? Now we think a lot more holistically about financial health. So not just can you open a savings account, but what does it look like to really improve resilience, to build those savings, and to meet customers in a way that's contextualized and where they're kind of fully engaged and fully educated on the process.
Hey everyone, this is Prashant and I'll be your host for the VC10X podcast, and today we have Liza from Accion with us. Liza is a portfolio and investment associate for Accion Venture Lab. Liza supports and leads investments in early-stage fintech companies, guides portfolio companies through strategic projects and engagement activities, and supports additional fund initiatives around gender lens, investing, and LP engagement. She is also responsible for the assessment of new investment opportunities and the development of investment thesis, particularly in the US market. In this episode, we talk about financial inclusion landscape across the world, how Accion is helping bring financial inclusion among the 3 billion financially excluded world population, different funds operating at Accion and their function, portfolio companies doing important work, and lots more. So without wasting any time, let's dive straight in. Oh wait, if you haven't subscribed to VC10X yet, please do and give us a 5-star rating if you find value in this episode. Now, let's start.
Hey Liza, so good to have you on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So good to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So to start things off, can we have your story and how you started investing?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really goes back to college for me. When I started college, I was really interested in international development and thought maybe I'd go work for a nonprofit or in the government sector. But my sophomore year of school, I did a program on social innovation in business. And through an internship at a fund of funds called Illumin Capital, really learned about the ability for VC and the private sector and investment capital to have an impact on the issues that I cared about. So from there, really didn't look back. Spent 2 years at Illumin Capital while I was in school, and then after school did a program called Venture for America, which is focused on creating economic opportunity in second and third tier American cities. So worked at the New Orleans Bioinnovation Center, investing in life science startups that wanted to create economic opportunity and jobs in the Southeast before moving to Venture Lab, where I work now.
That's awesome. And I saw that Accion is highly focused on financial inclusion and trying to drive that mission. So can you talk about how that's going and how does the financial inclusion landscape look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So still around the world, there are more than 3 billion people who are not or who lack access to sufficient financial services. So we're talking more than a third of the population. But over the last, say, 5 or 10 years, the term financial inclusion itself has really changed. So before, where we were talking specifically about, do you have access to a bank account? Do you have access to insurance products? Now we think a lot more holistically about financial health. So not just can you open a savings account, but what does it look like to really improve resilience, to build those savings, and to meet customers in a way that's contextualized and where they're kind of fully engaged and fully educated on the process.
Yep, that sounds very interesting. So like 3 billion of the world is still financially excluded. That sounds insane. That's a big number, right? And
yeah.
in developed economies, of course, we don't get a feel of it because obviously there are so many fintech apps. We have, especially in India, like we have one of the most advanced fintech landscapes. We can literally have our banks on our phones and make payments within seconds, like not carry a wallet at all. Just use the phone to make all payments, which is quite insane for us. And outside, it's not like that. But like hearing about that a lot of a big part of the population is still excluded is saddening, and it surely requires effort on our part to get them included as well. All right, so
yeah,
let's sure.
Well,
go ahead.
Just quickly, yeah, that's absolutely true. And a lot of our work does focus on emerging markets. But even in countries like India or the US, where I am, there are still big groups of people that the financial system just doesn't work well for. So there are, whole industries that are excluded because maybe formal financial institutions can't assess risk properly or can't reach those consumers because they're geographically distributed. So in addition to emerging markets, also focused on the US and have a lot of work in India as well.
For sure, that's true. Like India itself has a huge population, right? And myself is speaking from like tier one India, speaking from Delhi, from a privileged background. But sure, like our government is also trying to push inclusion a lot more, getting the unbanked banked, and there are multiple government schemes also going around. So pretty cool stuff. But yeah, a long way to go still. Yeah, so let's talk about how is Accion trying to solve for that, and what is the kind of work they're doing across different ways you're helping the financially excluded to get included.
Yeah. So Accion itself is a 60-year-old nonprofit, really a pioneer in the microfinance space. But around 10 years ago, looked up and saw the opportunity for fintech and fintech startups to address a lot of the problems that they were previously working on through microfinance institutions. So started Venture Lab, which is the fund that I work for, to be the seed stage investment arm. And a lot of times we solve for these problems by essentially investing in models that are at the intersection of fintech and other sectors like education, agriculture, logistics. So just to give an example, one of our newest portfolio companies is actually in India and a company called Accion. And they produce IoT-enabled farm equipment for shrimp and fish farmers on the coast. And that equipment helps farmers reduce their failure rates because they're able to monitor the farm 24/7. They get notified if there's any sort of malfunction, which is one of the biggest reasons for crop failure. So that helps them boost their income. But then it also provides Accion with the data they need to underwrite affordable, contextualized financial services that just really meet customers where they are and in a context that they understand.
Got it. All right. So you touched upon what kind of companies Accion is backing. So let's talk about, since you're someone who is involved in actually investing in these companies and evaluating what company should Accion invest in and what not, right? So what other things are you looking at while evaluating these companies? What boxes do these companies need to tick in order to get investment from Accion?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few, of course. Like most investors, I mean, one of the things that we care most about is obviously the team. These are long-term relationships, people that we're going to be working with for the next decade. And a lot of times it's not just people that we want to work with and people that are kind of high performers that we believe in, but also founders with differentiated experience that gives them sort of a unique angle and a unique ability to solve the problem that they're tackling. But more specific to our work at Venture Lab, there are two things that I think kind of differentiate our investment thesis in particular. One of them is that we look for companies that find ways to balance innovative technologies and sort of increasing digitization with also this sort of human touch along the customer journey. So for customers that have really been excluded or not well served by the formal financial system, we've seen that it's super important for startups to have that human touch component that helps them acquire customers, retain customers, but then also just reach their impact goals along the way.
Yep. And like you shared one of your recent investments, like what the problem they are solving in the agriculture space. So can you share some more portfolio companies that are solving some interesting problems?
Yeah, happy to. So I mentioned one in the ag space. I'll mention a US-based company now called GoodFind, which is building a vertical SaaS tool for food trucks. Food trucks have a limited shelf life, limited shelf space. They have collateral in the form of a truck, but oftentimes due to banks not being able to formally see the cash flows, also just high acquisition costs for banks and kind of lower ticket sizes. It can be really hard for food trucks to access financial services. So Good Find provides initially a point of sale system that enables food trucks to run all of their transactions through their tech platform. They also provide food trucks with ways to find new events to go to and data that helps them determine kind of how they can increase their operational efficiencies. And then on top of that, because they have all of this transaction data, again, they're able to layer on those financial services and provide food trucks with kind of everything that they need to operate.
Yeah, sounds good. And is there a specific stage that Accion is focused at, or do you invest across stages?
Yeah, we focus initially on companies that are pre-Series A. So pre-seed, seed, bridge to A, kind of anything but before that Series A is fair game.
Got it. And I was going to your website and I saw that there were like multiple investment groups investing within Accion. So how does that work? How is that structured? And what are these different, what do you call them, groups for?
Yeah, so Venture Lab is the seed stage arm of Accion. And then we have another fund called Accion Global Investments. So what they do is they make equity investments in microfinance institutions and other sort of innovative financial institutions that are reaching the customers that we care about. So they'll provide strategic support, operational support, and then also help those institutions digitize their operations so that they're able to better reach customers and provide also just more affordable financial services.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about fintech a little bit. So being an investor in this space, you obviously know what are the trends like and what kind of companies are coming up, and where they are coming up, and what's required that's not coming up enough, right? So
Sure.
What's your perspective on that?
Yeah. Did you say in the US specifically or?
Sure. Let's focus on US.
Sure. So, I mean, we saw that COVID played a huge role in increasing just digital adoption of financial services in the US. But I mean, as you mentioned kind of at the beginning of this call, the landscape is quite competitive, which has led to really high customer acquisition costs. So in the US, what we like to see is companies that have innovative acquisition strategies that help them reach healthy unit economics. So that could be on the consumer side, but it could also be on the side of supporting small businesses. And that's sort of the same reason that we're excited about companies like Good Find, which I mentioned, that are offering vertical SaaS. They're able to speak specifically to a niche customer segment, which helps them acquire customers, and then they can layer on financial services as sort of a new revenue stream.
Yeah, for sure. And talking about financial inclusion, what do you think is preventing this big part of the population and not be financially included? Is it because of convenience? Is it because they are not willing to get included because they have their own ways of doing it? Or is it something else?
Yeah, the core issue is kind of why are these customers not well served by financial institutions? And a lot of that comes down to the economics of how banks operate. So these are often low ticket sizes, which means that banks need to acquire these customers for less money essentially than they're going to make on the transaction, which at these ticket sizes can be difficult. And then on the acquisition side, I mean, we're talking about customers who, in a lot of instances, especially in emerging markets, are geographically dispersed. They might be in a rural area, or they might lack access to a smartphone. So a lot of it comes down to, how can we leverage technology to improve the economics of serving these customers and do so profitably and in a way that's truly inclusive.
Right. I'll tell you one very interesting way how I've seen financial inclusion shaped here in India. So we have these big fintech companies. One of the very popular ones is Paytm, which has kind of revolutionized payments at the very, very grassroots levels. All right. So when you go out, there are street vendors everywhere, right? And earlier you had to make them payments in cash, but now this company Paytm or multiple other UPI companies have put up their QR codes on these stalls, so you can just scan them, and then the money goes directly to their banks, their respective banks, right? So earlier, these people might not even have a bank account, but now they have a bank account, and for the convenience of this technology. And initially, I was skeptical. I didn't think that they're going to come in on this technology because they like hard cash. They like to feel the cash, right? And they don't trust if that money is actually going into their account or not, right? So I love how they implemented it and how a big part of the population is now included, who are basically day-to-day wage workers are now included because of this technology, right?
Absolutely. It's a great example.
Yep. So let's have the rapid fire round now. So these will be 5 quick questions about the investments that you're making through Accion. So the first one goes, what are the sectors and regions you invest in?
Absolutely. So we're focused on financial inclusion and fintech globally. Our core regions are the US, India, Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America.
All right. I know you answered this one earlier, but what's the typical stage you invest in?
Yeah, we're focused on pre-seed and seed.
All right. And what's the typical check size?
Anything between $500,000 and $1 million.
Okay. And where can founders pitch you?
Yeah, me personally, LinkedIn in my email. I'm happy to share that, and it's public on my LinkedIn profile. We also have a public email address on the Venture Lab website that founders are welcome to address.
For sure. Last one, where can our listeners follow you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best place for me.
Great. So I'll make sure to put all the links that you mentioned in the show notes below so our listeners can get there easily. It was great talking to you, and more power to you powering the financial inclusion landscape across the globe. Thank you for coming on. Happy investing.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
Pleasure.